So good afternoon. My name is Will Raap. I am the co-chair of the New Economics Institute, and I just need to make a clarification about Stories of Bali. Is that what it was called? Yeah, in my first welcoming talk, I talked about Bali as being a transformative organization, and someone came up afterwards and said, you know, I'm working with the Prime Minister of Bali, and I want to talk to you more about that. And I went, right, I should have said that there are two Balis, although I am most familiar with one. So this session, anyway, is really about this new economy that we are trying to create already coming into existence at the local level. We've talked about the hope and the idea of the new economy. We now want to talk about the practical reality and the momentum being built about this new economy at the local level. We have with us to do that David Orr and Michelle Long. Michelle has been with Bali from the beginning, more than a decade. She's now executive director of the organization. It's an organization that many of you know of as embedded in the United States as opposed to an island in Indonesia. And it is, in fact, representing more than 20,000 local entrepreneurs in 80 communities, really creating an upswelling of understanding about how this new economy is embedded in local economies. Michelle will talk about the tenets that Bali uses in advancing strong local sustainable economies and the implications over the last decade of that progress as well as what's coming in the future. I will talk at the end about how some of these same tenets can be applied at a regional or a state level. And David Orr, who's president, he was an advisor to the president of Oberlin College and a professor of long standing there, a main voice for environmental education and sustainability and responsible engagement with the environment for more than 30 years, will speak at the local level, as well as he is doing some very interesting work comprehensively in the idea of embedding local economic change and sustainability in Oberlin, Ohio, and beyond. So first we begin with Michelle.
Thank you, thank you. It's nice to see so many of you. I think I've kissed about 1/3 of you, and I'm open to kissing the rest. Mike? I thought you said I would like that. So I bet that some of you are here thinking that we're going to learn the answers to the strategies to a new economy. And alas, you find only fellow seekers. We've gathered some of the best here. I mean, I know so many of you, and you're good. And we are in a pickle. I saw where I live in Northwest Washington State recently painted on the side of a general store. It said, anyone who isn't confused doesn't understand the situation. And I loved how Bob was framing it this morning. I mean, we are in a time of experimentation, and I was reminded of a quote that I love so much from the Talmud that is about look ahead. It's not for you to complete the work, neither are you to lie it down. It is us to bring it forward. And so I was trying to find that quote. I wanted to say it precisely, and all I found online was a newspaper article quoting myself saying that quote. So that's how rumors get started. So I don't know where that came from. But our challenges are so big and so complex and so pervasive that at this point we may have done a lot along the way. We may have made a lot of rules along that way that did, in essence, funnel wealth into very few hands and separate us all from the impacts of our choices. But there's also at this point, any top-down solution that is going to solve any of our crises, environmental, equity, economic, spiritual. We have made thousands and millions of choices that have fundamentally changed our culture and our world, and it's going to take a whole lot of new kinds of actions. It's going to take hundreds and hundreds of thousands of solutions from the grassroots up to do this. There is good social science that would show that once a system becomes corrupted, a complex system becomes corrupted, whether it's an ecosystem or a human-created organization, that it has almost an impossible time fixing itself. It simply can't reimagine itself wholly. It can do business as usual plus a little recycling, but it can't actually reimagine something new. And that the best way and the proven way to do this is to find or create a safe space outside the dominant system from which something new can be created from the ground up. When I was listening to Bill McKibben last night, and he was talking about the oil companies, it reminded me in 2008, on NPR, I heard an interview, and it was with a Shell oil executive. You know, the Shell oil is very well known for their scenario planning. And he was talking about how they had basically two scenarios for the future of their business that they thought were most plausible. One, with dwindling natural resources and with increasing demand for their product. And one, they said, was the scramble, which was, in essence, Iran aligned. I mean, it was war. The scramble was war. This was one of the most plausible scenarios. The other most plausible scenario was what they called new blueprints. And this was at the local level, from the grassroots, people coming up with new solutions, coming up with something that works, connecting it to something else that works regionally, and then growing something new, an emerging next solution. And why I always remembered that was because the interviewer asked the Shell Oil executive, wow, did you all envision no plausible scenario whereby the leaders of our countries would get together at the UN level to avert certain and impending doom? And he said, no, we did not. So you know, we got the, one more little quote. Pema Chodron says this about the whole world is shook up, and right now we can either become, people are either going to become more fundamentalist and try to hold on to the way things were, or they're going to forsake the old ambitions and the old goals and start living life as an experiment, making it up as we go along. And I know that we do see the people who are right now trying to hold on with fundamentalism a bit more. I mean, you guys see this about the North Carolina lawmakers trying to outlaw sea level rise? It was bringing down development values. So on the Colbert Report, there was a great satire of this, and he said, well, you know, it was a team of international scientists who were showing that the sea level is going to be rising by, and he said, but you know, how are we to understand this? There's simply no way to understand this because it's metric. But many, many others of us are living life as an experiment and starting to make it up at the grassroots to re-envision how we can have healthy local economies. I was told by Will that I may be talking either 12 minutes or 30 minutes, and so I wasn't entirely sure until I showed up, so I'm going to skip that part. But I can share lots of more statistics and examples of how it's growing from the grassroots up, and will in the next session. But Bali is the fastest growing network in North America right now of local, our niche, we need us all, but our niche is local businesses. It's the farmers who are growing our food, the builders who are rethinking our buildings, the people who are providing power to our lives, the independent retailers who are providing the goods and services that we need in our communities, and they're working together at the local level, along now with more and more local economy funders who recognize that we're going to need to use coordinated strategies between philanthropy and investment in order to build new economies from the ground up. Let me turn, this is my only other slide. This is basically what I'm going to share with you guys. These are the tenets by which the people that we work with are innovating with their businesses. This is what we believe matters, and I was asked to sort of frame this session on what about local economies? What do we believe in? What do we stand on? And why does it matter? So first of all, we believe that ownership matters. Who owns the businesses, who has the decision-making authority, who's receiving the wealth matters. And it matters primarily for three reasons. The first is because when you have more local businesses in a place, you have more prosperity, more wealth for more people. The second is because you get better accountability and better decision-making for your community. And the third is, frankly, more meaning and purpose in our lives. And, you know, that matters. So I'll share a little bit more about each of those. the results are in regarding more wealth for more people. From Harvard Business Review to the Economic Development Quarterly now, we have all the data we need that show that a higher diversity of locally owned businesses in a place results in higher per capita income and jobs for that community. It does not do as good of a job as funneling wealth to few people, but it does do a better job at getting more wealth and more jobs to the most people. Second, by strengthening more locally owned businesses, we're increasing accountability. It's that kind of, you can't pass the buck to headquarters. And there's a great body of research now that shows that the best unit for decision-making is, in fact, 5 to 7 people, and that businesses of 20 or fewer employees who network with other businesses show greater resiliency, reliability, innovativeness, and positive social outcomes for a community. There's related research that shows as companies get larger, as organizations get larger, that large groups quickly develop into committee structures, executive leadership, and more people start to be silent, simply dropping out of the decision-making process. One person I thought I'd never quote, but I'm about to, is Ross Perot, and he said that as a board member of GM, that he was harking to this point, the bureaucracy. He was saying, you know what happens if a snake crawls in the back door at GM? Somebody calls the head leadership guy about snake catching, and then we have a task force appointed, and then we hire a consultant on snake capturing, and, you know, long ago, the snake has slithered out the door or, you know, multiplied into thousands or whatever was going to happen. So that's a basic principle of subsidiarity, that decision-making is best made by the people that are closest to it. And local businesses in a community give more to local nonprofits. They see the issue of that kid, that school, that river. And we all know local businesses who, in hard times, call their teams together and say, let's all have less hours until we get out of this recession, rather than flat across-the-line layoffs. And then the third reason is what I said, more meaning in our lives. You know and can feel that when more people are being in their vocation, their work of service to the world in the community, that it's better for them and it's better for all of us. When I was in high school, 16 or 17 years old, my mother then told me that I should, as I'm preparing for university, really consider becoming an occupational therapist. And I thought, that is amazing, Mother. Have you known me for 16 or 17 years? What about me would suggest that that would be the path for my essence, to become an occupational therapist? And she said, well, there's going to be a lot of jobs in that and good money to be made in that. And I knew even then how insane that was, that our culture and economy would teach a mother to tell her child that the best thing she should do was to find a job that would be in demand and make the most money, even though it had nothing to do with me. So before I leave the fact that ownership matters, I do want to say one more thing about this. We're not just about staying small, as in small impact. We would say question bigness, where bigness has meant a kind of violence, where it's like squash your competitor and squeeze your supplier and build a business model based on planned obsolescence or getting your customers to not be able to pay on time. But we are not about staying small in impact. What we're talking about is transforming thousands, hundreds of thousands of businesses in every place, getting them to solve the social, environmental, and economic challenges of their own place. And we're doing this through business models and business growth and ownership structures that are based on preserving the good things about ownership. So those may be organizations that are involved with Bali, like Organic Valley, which is 1,600 farmer-owner-operators that share distribution and marketing across North America, but all are retaining wealth and decision-making within their own communities. It could be organizations like the Zingerman's community of businesses and how they've grown deep in a place. I'll tell you lots more at the breakout session, but I did want to clarify that. I'm going to move on to place matters now. We align with a quote by Gary Snyder, find your place in the world, dig in, and take responsibility from there. Because at the place level, you can actually encounter the scenarios that enable you to feel and care about and the situations that we're facing. So I can care deeply about the big old oak tree behind my house that gets cut down, and I can't even comprehend 10,000 trees being cut down in the Amazon today, let alone 10,000 lives being killed today in wars somewhere in this world. It's also the place where you can take action. So at the local level, there's a great little story about a guy who said, when I was a young man, I was going to save the world. When I was a middle-aged man, I was going to save my country. I'm an old man now, and I am focused on the pond in my backyard. And he said, you know what? For the first time, I'm actually being successful. So in our local places, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the restaurateur says, I'm going to put local bacon and local turnips on my menu. And then they run into a challenge. And then there's some hoops to be figured out. And then there's some problems and solutions where innovation happens. Innovation happens at the local level where you're trying to discern and test new things. This is where local banks are saying, we want to loan more to farmers or to food artisan businesses or to solar panel manufacturers. But we're running into these kinds of challenges. This is where we're testing and innovating at the local level. We are working with lots of businesses who have built now their business around the idea that place matters. One example would be Eric Henry, who has a company called Cotton of the Carolinas. He's also in North Carolina, and he sells T-shirts. And he was realizing that he did the calculations to realize that the average T-shirt, before it shows up on your back, travels 16,000 miles between when the cotton is grown and then it's ginned and anybody know the other steps? You know, cut and sewn and all the things you have to do to make a T-shirt. And it was traveled 16,000 miles around the world. But there in North Carolina, they grew cotton. They had ginners. They had manufacturers traditionally. So he started to revitalize those industries and to make a new T-shirt that was dirt to shirt, 750 miles. Lots and lots more examples I could give you. The third one is around the idea that opportunity matters. We just came from our annual conference at Bali in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we had a wonderful woman, Maggie Anderson, talk. She's the author of Our Black Year, and she told us that today in the United States of America, there are 6 Black-owned grocery stores in the entire country. Yeah. And she said, yeah, unemployment for African-American people is 4 times higher than the rest of the population, but guess what? It's because there's no black business owners hiring them. And that little kids can go their whole lives. Yes, now they can see a president of the United States that looks like them, but they can go their entire lives never having seen a business owner that looks like them. There are no friends and family wealth to lend to the starting entrepreneur to start their new business. Some people would say, you know, we've got to change the big guys. If we change the big guys, we don't even want Walmart to have solar power. And to that, I would say, of course we want Walmart to have solar power. It's better than not having solar power. But that is not fundamentally changing the system. If that business model still funnels wealth into very few hands and makes the impacts of our choices very far away from the point of decision-making. I think Van Jones said it best. I took a quote from him. If we don't fix how we treat each other, we'll be rolling over life with solar-powered bulldozers and be shooting each other with wind-powered bombs. And the next one is nature matters, and David's going to share a lot more about that, so I'll kind of go quickly there. But I would say that the businesses that are in our network are innovating all the time with a recognition that, of course, all wealth comes from nature. And one example is Jason McClendon with the Living Building Institute. He's based out of Seattle, Washington. And living buildings are sort of what's beyond LEED buildings. These are buildings that have on-site wastewater treatment, on-site energy production. In essence, no wires or pipes in or out of the buildings. And they use stone from local quarries and timber from local forests. And they are supposed to be beautiful, like a flower. They are to be living. So businesses are innovating for our futures there. The next one is that we measure what matters. I find it fascinating to see how quickly this is evolving. I went to the session earlier where we saw the gross progress indicator from Maryland, the first state in the country to actually track a GPI, a genuine progress indicator. Many of the businesses that we work with are innovating in this way to look at their impact on the community, on the environment, on other local businesses, and on their employees. And at Bali, we're now working with some partners with funding from CERDNA to develop better how we can track our impact in our communities, and we'd love to work with more of you to do that. And then finally, relationships matter. And you want to know how much they matter? they matter most. And so, because this is how things change. I mean, it's a fact. We change because of relationships with other people. It all starts with the restaurant, the eater opening up to the farmer, the manufacturer reaching out to the community on which he depends, the reconnection between investors and entrepreneurs and lenders and borrowers. And when something new is emerging, the studies behind emergence and systems change would say that the best thing you can do to amplify and accelerate that emergence to what's coming next is to identify and name the innovators, to connect them to each other so that they can further their practice, to resource them with money, with studies that shows that how their work is working, and then to illuminate their stories so that others see the path that can be walked upon. And that's the place where we're in. That's the focus that we have, and that's the point of this conference. I feel like we gather here like storytellers around a cave fire with the intimations on the cave walls, and I'm telling you my dreams, and you're telling me your dreams, and our new dreams start to be created together. But I want to recognize and name that at this point, it's pretty normal to feel vulnerable and to give ourselves some grace with that because we don't have the answers. The final two things I'd share about that are, I have in my lifetime seen such radical rethinking about the things that we used to believe were fact. When I was getting my MBA, I had a macroeconomics course that I just could not understand. I would, not out of trying to be a wise guy, but I really was trying to understand what the professor was telling me. So I would just question and question and question, and I'd say, so you're saying that would be an externality, the world, the natural environment. Okay, and people aren't in there either. So so where would we use this? Are we gonna? Do we use this, or is this it's a theory? Okay, but then who do you show it to, and why would we have that theory if we can't use it on this planet with these people? And that professor would try so hard. I knew that it was tenuous because he tried so hard to convince me. Even when I left the program, he was still mailing me things in the mail to read. And the final thing I'll share is that I do think it's time for us to tap into different kinds of knowing, not just the kind that we're told in the books. When I was, this memory of mine was only uncovered relatively recently because I've had my own kind of opening and awakening the past few years. And I had a memory that when I was in 3rd grade, I was assigned by my teacher to write about the life of a tree. So I went to my great-grandmother's, and I sat under a willow tree in her yard, and I put my back against the tree, and I sat there the better part of the day, all day. And I got to know the tree. And I knew the life of the tree. I felt the tree, and I wrote about the tree, and I was so proud to have uncovered and had this relationship with this tree all day as an 8-year-old or 9-year-old. And then I turned it in, and I got an F. And I had never got an F before, and I was very upset. Apparently, I totally misunderstood the point of the paper. It's supposed to be the life cycle of the tree, from the nut to the sapling to the seedling, or something I could have just cut and pasted or Xerox photoed from the Encyclopedia Britannica that we had in our shelves. But I knew what I knew was, way better, and I course corrected. I course corrected to looking toward the books for where I should get my information, and I'm back to going to that place of knowing what the life of the tree is. And I'd encourage us all to tap in there and do the same with each other. So, thanks.
You should have come to Oberlin. I'd like to welcome the audience out there that's being live streamed to. This is going live to Dick Cheney's bunker. We could wish. Hey, this is a room full of heroes and heroines, and I want to thank all of you, and including the panelists here, for being such great examples and builders of intellectual capital and great examples for the world to follow. So thanks to all of you. We stand on the shoulders, as they say, of giants. John Stuart Mill, John Ruskin, Frederick Soddy, Herman Daly, E.F. Schumacher, Hazel Henderson of that group, the only one still alive. But also many of you here that have worked to rethink the economy and the way the world works. So thanks to all of you. I want to begin with just a wee bit of humor. Time magazine selected these people back in '99 to save the world, and they did an amazing job of it. That's why all of us are here. They created employment for the people that fix things. And then there was that day in October 23rd of 2008 when Alan Greenspan found a flaw in his thinking. You know, go figure. But many of you had been studying those flaws for a long time, and they're fundamental, and they're not, this is not a time to change the coefficients of the system. It's time to shift the structure of the system. And for a long time, we've been, as is said, walking north on a southbound train. And so how do we begin to rethink this? This is not a time for patchwork. I don't think personally that capitalism can be saved in its present form, at its present scale, and all of you know that as well as I do. And thanks to Gus Speth for including that in two wonderful books and a third to come out. But thanks to all of you for the same thing. So we're running a couple different deficits, and the issue I want to address is how do we take ideas to Main Street and then take them to scale, and that's the work of everybody in the room. I'm from Oberlin, Ohio. This is a picture taken. I made a mistake last fall of saying to an audience, just as kind of a wise guy, that the way you get pictures like this is to attach a naive first-year student to a helium-filled balloon. Equip it with electronic camera download. And I said, this picture was taken by Bob, and we miss him a lot. He didn't transfer, he just kind of drifted away. And a woman afterwards who thought I was perfectly serious came up to me and said, you know, you really shouldn't treat your students like that. So we're a typical Ohio downtown, poverty level of 28% at or below poverty. 53% of students in the public schools are free and reduced lunch. We're Rust Belt. And where the gravity mass of the Rust Belt economy goes, that's where we will go unless we can get a lot smarter. You've heard a good bit about the Evergreen Project, Ted Howard's work, and Anders Ferguson, who's here, and other people involved in that project. Detroit is not far from us. Our goal in this project is to do several things. One is to begin to harness the technological revolution and shift our energy sources from fossil fuels to renewable and efficiency, get to local foods, and the local foods movement is booming. I was at a slow foods conference last week in Brattleboro, or a slow living conference. Flew in, flew out, rapidly got there and rapidly left. Smart growth, new urbanism, we know how to build great cities now, and many of you are involved in that part of the work. We know local ownership from Gar Alperovit's work and Mike Schumann, and many of you, again, we know local ownership works. And it is the way to begin to revitalize local economies. But we want to figure out how you secede from an economy dominated by big oil and banks and sprawl and so forth, and what Thomas Jefferson once called remote tyranny. So how do we do that? And that's the movement that all of you are involved in. It coincides with a magical revolution in human capabilities, the ecological design movement. Call it whatever you will. But if you ask the question, can you power businesses by sunshine, and can you make them zero discharge, pollution-free, the answer is yes, we can. We know how to do that. Can you power the country by sunshine, efficiency? The answer again is yes. That's not a technical issue. It isn't really even an economic issue. It's a leadership issue. Could we grow food organically and sustainably in a way and feed the world? The answer again is yes. This is not an issue of technology or know-how. That has come together below the radar screen. This has not been part of the public discourse. You certainly don't see it on Fox News. You don't see it much in the mainstream media, but it's happened because of the work of many of you. The Omega Institute here locally has a living building. Working well, so the standards for the built environment have gone up. The standards for everything have gone up. We know how to do these things. This is where I live. We're about 83 miles from Detroit. We are about 35 miles from downtown Cleveland. Toledo is about an hour to our west. Youngstown, close to where I grew up, which is now a ghost town, pretty much is off to the east by another hour or so. This is a very typical Ohio main street. If you sell in a college town, if you sell beer and coffee and pizza, you're doing well. If you sell any hard goods and lots of services, your business is on a real, very thin ice. This is the Apollo Theater, and it's part of what, in trying to rethink our assets. One of the things that we have in Oberlin is a great arts community, a great craft community, a wonderful college that I work for, and that's an advertisement. Lots of people, I'll extend that advertisement in just a minute. Lots of people know lots of different things. Part of the problem is we've not gone about economic renewal as a system project. 12 years ago, we opened the Adam Joseph Lewis Center. This is a picture of it. This is the first substantially solar-powered building on a U.S. college campus. I think to this date, it's still the only zero-discharge building on a U.S. college campus, drinking water in, drinking water out. This became the template for a larger thing we're calling the Oberlin Project, and we have 5 goals. The first is to take a block in the downtown area that's owned by the college that includes a great art museum, one of the famous art museums in American higher education, a performing arts center, and other amenities, and redevelop that block at the Platinum U.S. Green Building Council, Platinum for Neighborhood Development scale with one extra proviso. We want to make this an economic driver in a downtown. We want it as an anchor institution, use our buying power, investing power, and so forth to change the downtown economy. Our second goal is to get to carbon neutrality. We are one of 14, we're obviously the little kid on the block, one of 14 cities selected by the Clinton Climate Initiative, which is now rolled into the C40 cities. The goal is to get to carbon neutrality by 2025. We think we can do it. The electric supply will be 96% carbon-free by next year. So as you begin to look at these things, you know, from this side of Mount Everest or this side of the mountain, it looks like it's an insurmountable peak to cross. In fact, when you begin to break it down into doable chunks, these things are much more manageable. Third goal is to grow 70% of our food locally. Ohio used to be a farm state. We had 250,000 farms about 70 years ago. We're down to about 60 or 65,000. Mostly growing corn and soybeans for the cattle business and shipping that over to the Midwest. We want to do this, as we did with the Lewis Center, as an educational project. So we put together a consortium of 4 kinds of institutions: the college, the public schools, a vocational school, and a 2-year college. And the question here is, what do young people need to know to live well in this particular world and be relevant, live lives relevant to the crises or crises that are upon us? And then we want to figure out how to go to scale. How do we take this to a national market? How do we begin to take more of communities and begin to put these together and make this work nationally? We've organized the community around 11 teams. You see 7 on the screen because I couldn't figure out how you get 11 balls on this screen. But that's my disability. The community is organized about 300 people. We have a major session that begins tomorrow, planning and envisioning session with all the folks. About 300 people locally are engaged in this, so we've been not most of them aren't college faculty. These are people from the community around policy and law, education, communication, economic revitalization, community mobilization, agriculture, forestry, and renewable energy, and there are 4 others. So we've gotten the community organized. Now the phrase at the top of the screen, full spectrum sustainability, is just a fancy way to say you're going to have lunch with lots of different people. And we've organized the world as a series of silos, and the goal here is to break out of those silos and begin to do this in a way that each of those parts and each component of the parts begins to reinforce the larger pattern and call it whatever you will, integrated development, sustainable development, whatever it is. But we in this movement, whatever the movement is, but we in this movement have gone about our work mostly as a series of one-off kinds of things. So we do renewable energy, and there's that side, and we do economic renewal, and that's that side, and there's education, and you know the picture. The goal here is to take these things and wrap them together into a single system where the parts do reinforce the resilience and prosperity and sustainability and fairness of the whole thing. I don't want to get into this slide, but Donella Meadows wrote a wonderful essay years ago called Leverage Points, or Places to Intervene in the System. How many of you have read that? Okay, if you didn't put up your hand, or if you're asleep, read that essay. That's what professors do. We assign reading. So read it. You can Google Donella Meadows, Leverage Points, and the essay comes up. Now, the point of this is this. What she was trying to address is, where do you intervene in systems? And all of you have dealt with this in one way or another. And her point in this is, in inverse order, at the top are the least effective things that we do as change agents. The most effective things that we do are to change worldviews and patterns and the ways people think. It isn't rules and regulations. So Google this and read this, but we passed this essay out to the community to try to get people thinking about, how do we change this? It's easy, I think, in this world to be right. It's hard to be right and effective. And we don't have a lot of time to become effective. Last couple of slides. We are in Oberlin, when you look at our assets as a community, we are, I think, and people like you and me are generally regarded by the populace at large, certainly my sister, as boring people. Part of the problem is we talk about policy stuff and parts per billion and parts per million and species going extinct. Now the question is, can we begin to widen the dialogue? And I think we are, and this is the other part of the advertisement for Oberlin College. Oberlin College has a great conservatory of music, one of the famous conservatories around the world. It's got a science program. It turns out more young people that go on for PhDs than any small liberal arts college in the country. It's got the #3 art museum in higher education, ranked behind Harvard and Yale. Now, the point of this is this. Can we repackage these into a bigger dialogue about the human future that is not boring, that takes in all facets of the human personality and the arts and the sciences and culture and music and so forth? And oh, by the way, the food is grown locally. The energy that powers this is from the sun. So that's the goal. This is the Green Arts Block from, this is the last picture Bob took before he went east. At the top is Allen Art Museum, Performing Arts Center in the middle. You can see this, and I don't have a laser pointer that will reach it. And then the hotel here, we want to redevelop the whole block. We have a design team working on this and so forth. This is the hotel. My boss, the president of the college, said never to say that this is a hotel that is a plausible excuse for limited nuclear war. So I don't say that anymore, but this is a 1955 motor inn. We want to rebuild it. And this for us, the way the strategy worked out, this for us is the driver and the linchpin for economic renewal of the town, for lots of reasons I don't have time to get into. So in our case, this is the particular development strategy. It resides very heavily on downtown renewal. The hotel is the linchpin for that. These are a couple of schematic drawings for that block. The board yesterday approved the next stage in the hotel development. These are just simply schematics. Again, this is not architectural drawings. This is a project immediately across the street, started by 3 former students, Oberlin, who stayed in town and did a $17 million redevelopment at the, right in the middle of the downtown at the LEED Gold level. This is Sherrod Brown. Karl Rove has targeted him so far with about, I think it's $8 million in outside money. Thank you, John Roberts from the Supreme Court. So he is being targeted. Now, the point of this slide is to get that little political thing in there, but also to say that Sherrod, right after I took this picture, turned to me and said, "Where did you get that array?" And I said, "Our choices, when we had to buy it, where you could buy it in Germany, you could buy it in Japan, you couldn't buy it in Ohio. Now you'd buy it from probably a Chinese vendor." And the irony was very simply that 24 miles to the east is the NASA Glenn Space Center, where a good bit of the technology that went into manufacturing and making photovoltaics was developed. 50 miles to the west was First Solar, at that time the largest PV manufacturer in the United States. But they had sold all their production for 5 years to Germany, where there was a feed-in tariff. Policy matters. This is one of the farms we started in the Greenbelt. This is a summation. And I'll not go into this except saying that we have so far invested about $53 million in various activities around this Oberlin project, rebuilding the local economy, starting local businesses. So we've started a buzz. We've had Garl Perovitz and Mike Schumann and there to help us rethink what the economy looks like and what ownership looks like. To date, these are the things that we've done. And again, I'll not read this except to say that we're 3 years into a major remaking of the local economy. And when people ask, what's the most limiting factor, what's the biggest problem you have, it really isn't money. Money is a problem from time to time, but that's really not it. It's imagination. How can we reconceive our places and our role in those places for all the wonderful reasons that Michelle laid out? And that's the challenge for us to reach. These are the goals of the next couple of years. Some construction, a lot of organization, a lot of business development. And this really does come down to rethinking how we provision ourselves with food and energy and shelter and water and livelihood, and begin to do that locally, to begin to secede from Jefferson's remote tyranny. Three last thoughts. Full spectrum sustainability means a lot of things. So if you take a beam of light, refract it through a crystal, the different wavelengths come out differently. So if you ask an Oberlin student, what's the Oberlin project? Well, it's a really cool 24/7 downtown. If you ask faculty, it'll be better facilities. If you ask business people, it's the doubling or tripling we believe that we can occur in a downtown economy. If you ask Sherrod Brown or Marcy Kaptur, our representative, it is a model of economic renewal in the Rust Belt. For Bill Clinton, it's climate action. How do we move this? How do we fast-track the transition to carbon-free energy sources? For me as an educator, this is a great educational project. I want 1,000 students to work with our design team over the next 10 years and begin to engage those young people so they learn who are heroes and heroines, and they learn the habits of rolling up their sleeves and solving problems. For our design team, some of the best designers in the world, it's a model of ecological full-spectrum design, and those are rare. The final thing is national security. There is a growing movement and a recognition that America is an incredibly fragile, vulnerable country. And it isn't that we've got outside enemies coming in, it's that we are, in many ways, our own worst enemy. We have created, as Amory and Hunter Lovins put it back in 1982, a very brittle economy. Lots of things can bring it down. And so if you ask, will the electric grid go down? People at the Pentagon will tell you, yes, it will go down. It's not a matter of whether, it's when it goes down. And when it goes down, one of the Pentagon officials at a meeting several years ago said, it'll launch us back to the 14th century. Now, why not the 13th or the 18th? I don't know. But the 14th was a perfectly good century. But imagine a world where you can't use a credit card, you can't turn on your furnace, you can't get refrigeration, you can't pump gas, you can't do anything. That will bring the country to a standstill. That's the world we've created. And all of you know, you can multiply that, the food system and the banking system and all these other things. So this is a real national security thing. So the final thing I'd say is this. A group of us, including Gus Speth here and others, Bill Becker and Colonel Puck Mickleby, Mark Mickleby, and Patrick Doherty at the New America Foundation, to put together an effort to replicate full spectrum sustainability across the country. How can we fast track this? When Colonel Mickleby took this into Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mullen's response was, yes, you've got to do this. You've got to create this network, but you've got to do it in every congressional district in the United States, and you've got 10 years to do it. So that's our assignment. Now, it has two parts to it, as you can see on the slide. One is to begin to get the activities of all of us at local levels, take that energy and the anger and the angst at the local levels and rechannel that to solarizing communities, building local economies that work, re-educating people, making those communities zero discharge, viable, fair, decent, sustainable, and resilient places. That's the challenge. But at the top, this has to aggregate into something much bigger. And so at the very top, the question is, what do we want to be as a country when we grow up? And so the idea of a grand strategy at the top, calibrated with this bottom-up effort. We've got to do both. We cannot just be local people. This has to aggregate into a larger vision of what we are as a country and as a people. Thank you.
So I learned a lot from David. I learned that, in fact, what Vermont's doing is preparing for the 14th century. And from Michelle, I realized that what we're really doing is creating a safe space outside the dominant system to explore. So at least I understand now what this Vermont process is that we've been going through. My effort now is actually to try to use quickly, because we're running a little short on time, some of the Bali tenets and give you a sense of how we're using them to value in the state of Vermont. So the first one is the idea that ownership matters. Already we have the largest per capita small business ownership in the country. That's sort of Jeffersonian impact that we have, an economy that's engaged with the sense of place. Beyond that, we in Vermont actually think that we are the people. that we control the government. We have a thing called town meetings that are engaging every March the process of guiding the democratic process in that community. We have a citizen legislature where people are not professional legislators. They go from their farms or from their small businesses or from their NGO job into the legislature, and then they leave again. They see themselves as part of a process. I was on the waterfront in Burlington 2 nights ago. I ran into Ben Cohen, Ben and Jerry's. He said, look at your money. I looked at my money, $10 bill. It says, we the people on that $10 bill. And he's involved in the overturning Citizens United process. It's not we the corporations, it's we the people that really matter. So he was willing to stamp my money, get money out of politics on this side, and on this side, not to be used for bribing politicians. Or on this side, the system isn't broken, it's fixed, right? So it's not illegal to stamp your money. Imagine the kind of advertising power if everyone was out there stamping their money as if we owned the government. We are the people. Corporations are not the people. Vermont believes that. It believes it so much that last March in our town meetings, 65 towns ratified the idea that we should overturn Citizens United. And in April, our legislature went on record to support a constitutional amendment to overturn that Supreme Court ruling. We can have impact when we decide that ownership matters. It's not just at the enterprise level, it's at the government level. At the level of opportunity matters. This is perhaps the place where Vermont can be most powerful, I think, because we have a kind of alignment that comes out of a culture that is both embracing sort of Yankee independence and progressive thinking that a Ben & Jerry's kind of corporate point of view brings to us. And we figure out how to meld those things together. Most recently, we've done that in the envisioning process of a new kind of economy related to 2 areas, food and energy. Why food and energy? Because in the 1990s, a local NGO did an analysis that says, how can we in Vermont improve the average wage of a Vermonter? And one of the key findings was you plug the leaks of food being purchased outside of Vermont and energy being brought in, purchased outside of Vermont. The more food we buy, the more energy we can produce, more food we can produce locally and energy we can produce locally, the more we are stemming a flow out of value. What's happened over the last decade is, in both of those areas, something very profound. First of all, a systems analysis guided by actually a process in the Midwest called Raap to look at creating a mechanism to change the system related to food and to change the system related to energy. The food system change is called farm to plate. Vermont already is identified as the highest per capita consumer of local food. How do we continue that? How do we accelerate that? That's only going to, establishing that point of view of our leadership in per capita local food consumption happened because we had still an embedded sense of our responsibility to farms, to quality food, and there was a general cultural attitude of positivity around that point of view. But can we actually, and here are the goals of Farm to Plate, double in the near future the amount of local food produced in Vermont? And beyond that, and this is where it gets really interesting, can we have a 50-year plan that's part of a New England food shelf, a food shed? Everyone heard the idea of food shed? I think it's a wonderful idea. Where is your food coming from within an ecological system that you can actually engage with? Can we, over the next 50 years, have 80% of our calories coming from the New England food shed? Now, Vermont already has a strategy of moving itself towards that point. We have to engage and collaborate with states around us to achieve that same outcome. In the whole Energy Action Network area, that again was a system change. The Farm to Plate was initiated by what I call a backbone organization, Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility. It's like Oberlin College is a backbone organization for what's happening in Oberlin. Look to see if you can find, create, and engage those backbone organizations. Energy Action Network was actually a foundation, and more broadly, the Vermont Community Foundation, a group of philanthropic organizations that said, the biggest lever we have, perhaps, in terms of improving economic systems, creating green jobs, is to really engage with our energy system in a cohesive way. So that in that case, farm to plate, it was more a top-down, bottom-up combination. Energy Action Network process was more go with people who are leaders in this energy system and then engage higher and higher levels of understanding as you move into a more broad-based engagement with the energy system. The goal there is 80% of our energy coming from renewable sources, not just electricity, but transportation and thermal. We are driving a process of engagement with all the key stakeholders to figure out how to get that. It started with identifying a vision, recognizing that that vision is going to unlock all kinds of very interesting opportunities over time. We're talking about decades, but that's where the engagement. Oberlin's not going to convert overnight. It's going to be a long-term process. Finally, I'll speak a little bit about measure what matters. This is key. We've done some good work in that regard in Vermont. We did do a genuine progress indicators application for the county that I live in, Chittenden County. But in this last legislative session, the Gund Institute of Ecological Economics at the University of Vermont, another backbone organization, and the Gross National Happiness Organization combined to go to the state legislature and get the genuine progress indicator agreed to, established, committed to, become an evaluation process in looking at state policy, capital investment, and the state budget. So things like, what is the cost of underemployment? What is the value of a local farm or of household work? What is the cost of crime? These kinds of questions that don't normally ever get dealt with by gross national or gross state product indicators are now going to be explored within the legislative policy-making process in Vermont. And what we have is this citizen legislature who are accessible, and the process of shifting from a GDP point of view to a GPI point of view is very possible because we have people who are willing to listen, and they're part of a larger cultural context that really is recognizing we can be a change agent for our values internally as well as for our external impacts in the larger culture. The last thing I'll say relates to place matters and nature matters. There's a high existing commitment to communities, to nature, and to the recognition. As a matter of fact, the #1 value, if you look at all private sector, public sector, government, higher ed, the consistent value that pops up the highest is the importance of the working landscape. So in the last legislative session, there was new legislation passed to essentially recognize we must flow capital, we must flow investment to the opportunity to enhance this working landscape. And in that process, we are investing in the idea of place, we're investing in the idea of nature, and we're creating jobs that win if we are creating healthy place and creating healthy relationships with nature. So I'll just end with the fact that this kind of change, whether it's Bali doing it at the national level, whether it's Oberlin College doing it at a local level, or whether you're talking about a state level, it requires an engagement of backbone organizations that understand the big picture and can figure out how to engage with the tenets of Bali that you just were offered in a way that continually moves the process forward. That is the process of returning to the idea that we, in fact, control the game. Thank you.